names and not a lot of faces. So I do encourage you, if you're in a place that you can turn on your camera and your video, that would be great. I do see a few familiar names on the screen, so I'd love to see your face. Hello, there we go, one brave soul. Hi, how are you? So we have an hour today, and it's going to be a mix of me sharing some information. I will put on a PowerPoint, but I prefer to limit that as much as I can, because I really want to provide a forum for all of us to come together and talk through our situations, your respective situations that you're facing in your organization. Hi, Rick, I see you pop up there. Thank you. And we're going to do that throughout the session today. So like I said, I'm going to encourage you. We're going to poll. I think I see our first poll question up there. Feel free to do that. And I'm also going to encourage you, raise your hands, ask questions as I'm sharing information. If something resonates with you, I'm sure it will also resonate or spark some conversation for your colleagues that are on the call. So just to kind of anchor us in our conversation, what we're going to be discussing is really setting the groundwork for this three-part series. I do believe Beth and Essence, they're going to capture this, so be able to share it and with others that aren't on the call today. But today we're really setting the foundation and really looking at, how do we, one, get a good snapshot of where we are in regards to, our talent needs and our talent acquisition approaches, and set the groundwork for that, and then share some of those situations we're having, but more importantly, some different strategies and employer-controlled strategies that can be implemented to hopefully bridge the gap for your needs in regards to talent, as well as connect with the applicants that are in the Rutherford County area. So without further ado, I will jump on. Thank you for those that have jumped on. I can see your faces. I, again, encourage others to do so as well. All right, so we've got our first poll in, and it says basically regarding talent, which has been your biggest hurdle in the past 12 months. So we have a large majority here saying finding talent, getting talent, attracting talent at 62% as of the moment is the biggest struggle, biggest challenge that we're facing. The other is keeping talent at 38%. So hang on to that. I will as well. I'll make a note here. And we will dive into that in our conversation, because I want to hear more about your particular experiences with that. So for this first section, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go over a little bit of information about the market and what makes this particular downturn different than previous ones that I'm sure many of you have lived through. Right. Bear with me for just a moment. Make sure this is going to technology work in my favor here. Oh, let's see. There we go. All right. So we're going to look at how we rethink our approach to talent acquisition and management. We are going to lean a little heavier on the acquisition piece, but again, as we noted in the poll, some of you are having challenges with retaining talent. So we'll dive into that as well in our open conversation. All right, so I'd like to share a little bit in preparation for this conversation today. I had the opportunity to talk with Beth, talk with Essence to say, what is happening in Rutherford County? What are some stories, some real life stories that potential job candidates are having as they're looking for those next opportunities? And then on the flip side of that, I said, what's some of the feedback? What are some of the stories that some of you all are having as employers trying to attract good quality talent in order to optimize your operations there? So I'd like to share a story of a candidate that really stuck out to me in those conversations. So there is a potential job candidate in the healthcare space, highly skilled. So we'll go ahead and highlight some of those. This individual is skilled for the roles that she was applying for. She applied to 4 different healthcare organizations within the Rutherford County area. And Unfortunately, in her experience, is that she never got a call back or was never reached out to via email or via phone to continue that process. So she is in a place currently where she is, I believe, has a job in Woodbury, which is a little further out there than in the Rutherford County area, and that she's now commuting back and forth. So she is already employed, but looking for opportunities that are a little closer to home for her. So that's just one of many examples, and maybe later in the conversation, Essence can share a couple others. On the flip side of that, when we look at some of the examples, and you guys on the call here are probably more equipped to share your examples around this and some challenges that you're having, but you're not getting enough applicants. And when you do get an applicant and you do schedule an interview, sometimes there are no-shows. Show of hands if that's happening to you. Feel free to use that to let us know if that's one of the things you're actually experiencing with attracting talent, that you can attract them, but you may have a no-show. A few other stories that some of you shared was that you would have talent, they would start and they would apply, but they would leave to go elsewhere for just a slight difference in pay. It could be 50 cents, it could be $1, it's all relative in that regard, but you're losing that talent and that investment that you made on the front end. Another big thing that's really stuck out to many employers right now is especially in the operations side, manufacturing side, construction side, and hospitality side, is that you're having candidates come in to interview in order to check a box. And really just, they're doing that to check a box to continue to get the unemployment. So we're seeing that's also a major challenge for a lot of employers right now, depending on the demographic and the types of jobs and industry that they're looking to fill for. So you can see that there's multiple experiences here, but what we're also seeing is that they're very different. And I wonder, and in our conversations, is why is this happening? But more importantly, is what do we need to do to make this a better experience in order to connect these candidates that are available in your market to the open positions that you have within your respective organizations. Before we dive into that, I want to provide a little bit of data to kind of anchor us into what we're in from a market perspective. I think many of you are probably informed around this and aware of this, but I like to do this in the context of this conversation. So if we look at some of the data in regards to the unemployment rates, and this is from more of a macro level from the US, during recessions and recoveries. So if we look at the 2001, you can kind of see where we are at the unemployment rates and the longevity of that over time. Well, you'll see that 3-year trajectory. 2007, you see that same where we have that long range that is a slower incline and then a steady at that around that 9% mark. So let's take a look at 2020, the year of unique times that are unlike any other. When you look at just analyzing economic trends and data, you'll see here where we are at that February-March timeframe. This is again US at 3.5%. Wow, look at that incline. April jump up to 14.7. And then what we'll see here, and I think what I want to highlight, is just within that 6-month time period, we're back down to 8.4. So that's the differentiator here compared to recent recessions and recoveries, is the variable of time. And so want to highlight what makes that unique. But let's look at it from a different angle. Let's look at it from the job openings standpoint during recessions and recoveries. Here we are in 2001. You'll see that job openings kind of dip down, and then it's a slow go to kind of move back up. 2007, you'll see that dip it goes down, and then it's pretty stable, and then just a slow incline. Again, the variable of time here is critical to look at and important. But yet again, when we look at 2020, you see that stark variability, that stark decline, but more importantly, that really stark incline there. And so you'll see in looking at that, is that we're really to a place that the key takeaway for you all on this call is that given that rapid economic downturn, the job openings have remained unusually high, at a high level, and pretty stable when we look at that length of time of that 5 to 6 mark, which is where we are today. When we drill down a little bit, so where are we at in Rutherford County? That's at a micro level, or at a macro level before, looking at the US data. Rutherford County, we go back to that March timeframe. Into March, we're at 2.4%, pretty remarkable. When we had that great incline through April, we hit at Rutherford County a 16.7% unemployment. It's hard to imagine that. But when we look at then what happened over time, just within a few short months, we're back down, and where we are as of end of October, we're at a 5.4% unemployment rate. So we are dipping down and really at a fast clip, getting back into that. I won't quite go as say as where we were in March, but you can see where we're trending. And we'll talk about why that's important here. Here it is just as a reference point compared to the US all on one slide. You can see where we were in March, where the US was in April, and kind of see where you compare, and then where we are today. So when we look at the numbers in Rutherford County, and I was doing the research to say, okay, well, what does this mean in regards to job openings and available candidates? And here's where we ended up. Again, this is from October 21st, end of October. So at that point in time, we were at 5,183 job openings with over 27,000 potential candidates within your county. I'd like just to take a moment. Is anyone surprised by this, or what are your thoughts when you see this data? Please feel free to jump in. Anyone? Okay.
Just one quick observation.
Sure.
And so one chart that I love looking at, it's not on here, but it is unemployment filings, you know, laid against all of these data in terms of position openings and unemployment rates and the like. And so a lot of different factors, I think, are at play here, but these are excellent data that tell a story about where we're at and what's going on in the county.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Yeah, I think it's always important to kind of benchmark where we are and know what we're working with, and to highlight what makes this downturn so different. And the general rule of thumb in economic theory is basically when we hit a downturn, it flips into an employer-centric market. So we have fewer openings, more candidates, and things of that. We're not seeing that this go around. With the uniqueness of the situation we're in. So it really is, when we think about from an employer standpoint, if we looked at it at the macro level based on past experiences, we'd say, okay, we can reposition our strategy for talent acquisition in more geared towards that employer-centric strategy. But this particular situation is not the case. And I'm just, in the data here, even on the screen, is showing that we still, as an employer, have to operate with that employee-centric strategy in how we stand out. So the onus is really still on that employee, where, a lot of the conversations we were having and the things that I was hearing is the war for talent, and that was pre-COVID situation. And yet what I'm hearing right now is we're still in that. And that's what makes this particular downturn so unique. Another variable that makes this this particular downturn unique as well is the variability in how it's impacting industries. So in my work as a coach, and I get to work with all these different organizations and industries, even within here in the Middle Tennessee area, is I can be in one company and they're hiring like crazy, and then I can go across the street to another company, maybe in a different industry, that are going through furloughs and layoffs. And so, this is a very unique time when we have that much variance. And so the big takeaway around that is that it really becomes important for the employer to look at this and at a very micro level, and to invest the time to focus on those conditions in your respective industry, as well as within your local labor market. And that information is going to determine and guide you on how you adjust your talent strategies. And again, it is just still denoting that we are in an employee-centric market for the most part, even though when you look at some of that other data and compare it to other economic volatility or recessions, you would take a different strategy and a different approach overall at a high level. All right, so let's, here I'm gonna keep going, and I'd like us to get back so we can have some open conversations here. And move to the next slide.
Well, I had been waiting for Rick to finish. I'm terrible at interrupting. I'm sorry.
Oh, please do. No, I welcome the interruption. And what is your name? It's not public.
My name's William. I'm with Network Technology Partners here out of Smyrna, Tennessee. Looking at 2000, I'm sorry for not knowing what happened in 2001 that caused that recession, but I know that 2007 was the housing bubble, correct?
Correct. Yes.
What was 01?
Actually, I'm not sure. I mean, in the sense that the exact reason or prompt for that recession. Does anyone on the call know? I'm aging myself, I guess, right? Who was around and working in 2001 when we had that small dip?
Never forget, right?
If you're
It's 9/11.
If you're willing.
I'm shamed. Yeah, no. So 9/11.
I'm there with you, William.
Beth piped up. She said it was 9/11.
Yes, we should. Okay, well, I should remember that one. In my college days, it was obviously. But if we go back, and I'm not going to go back through the data, but if you were to go back and look at that slide, that dip or that variability when that happened wasn't as stark and wasn't as prolonged. Right. So it was a little different in the implications for the organizations and employers and how they navigated that.
Well, historically, we see wartime recovery, right? I mean, so that fixed 2001. 2007 was just the continuation of that war in theory. But for 2020, we have a pandemic. So it's kind of like event-driven recession. So I don't feel like the data it doesn't really matter to look. You can't look at them all together and then try to draw conclusions that way. They're kind of isolated incidents and they have to be treated as such.
Absolutely. And I think in that sense, William, that only underscores the reason why we have to look at it at a micro level, because the variance, this is, I mean, unlike anything, any one of us or any organization has had to face, and how to be fluid and pivot around that. And that's where it's really underscoring the ultimate message here is what happened before and the way that we handle those things does not apply here. That's why it's really critical, even within some of the larger organizations that I work in that have geographical disbursement of their talent, of their employees or offices. They, even at that place, have to go in and look at it within their geographical areas, because what would work in one part of the country or part of the world is not going to work in another. So I think you're right, William. Those previous rules do not apply here. So that's, again, underscoring the reason why we have to look at things differently. And so on that note, let's segue, because I think
Christie,
yes.
Excuse me. Lawrence Everett had raised his hand. He had a question.
Hi, Lawrence.
Hey, Christie, Lawrence from Lee Company. Hey, I just had a real quick question. Do you think, and what we noticed from the pandemic, or what I've noticed, is that since most of our folks are essential workers, we've noticed that the talent pool has been a bit lopsided because certain industries have been hit harder than others, specifically like hospitality and food service and things like that. So I know that there's a larger talent pool, but it's not necessarily the right talent, if you know what I mean. I was just interested in your thoughts on that.
Lawrence, absolutely. And I think you're probably not alone in that. And that's where we're getting into skills, which it's nice to hear your voice. I haven't seen you in a while. So in regards to the trades, right? I mean, I think you guys were already in a place of how do we attract and fill the pipeline for the needs of lead company or those in the trades. And I think as we're looking at this, we're still going to have some of the same challenges around skill level, depending on your respective organization and the uniqueness of that. So I'd like to hear, from others if you're, facing a similar situation when it comes to that. But that being said, though, I think that is the challenge that we had even before the situation we find ourselves in now, and figuring out ways in which we supply that pipeline in order to meet our needs. So yeah, good point, Lawrence, for sure. Let's go into what are the employer controlled strategies here, right? Because there's a lot of things. Lawrence just brought up one thing that is kind of out of our control to some degree in the short term. I think when we look at the variable of time in the long term, there are strategies and ways to partner with the community and do different things to help to build out that pipeline of talent that's needed for your respective organization. I know, at least for example, with Lawrence there, the Lead Company University, they're doing different things to try to skill up talent. They're partnering with the schools and the local colleges and different things of that nature, which I'm sure many of others are doing have similar efforts here. So those are the long-term strategies that I think are still just as critical and as important to continue to be focused on. But when we look at some of the short-term strategies that we want to maybe consider in regards to attracting talent during this unique time period, let's segue into that and spend a little time here. And please, again, feel free to share some information as we go through these. So I had to put right out of the gate, pay, right? That's a given. And I know with some folks, it's going to be, that may not be a lever in your control to pull. But when we look at what are some of the other ways in which, if your talent, if you benchmark and find what are other companies doing right now in these particular times. So for instance, we have like the Starbucks, some of the hospitality industries or essential worker industries such as Kroger, they're doing different things where they're basically saying, we're going to increase pay temporarily. We're going to up the hourly wage temporarily, right, to attract those workers and keep the ones that they have. Kroger, I don't know if you guys, familiar, if we have anybody from that. I know one of the home offices are here locally, but they basically did a sign-on bonus. So when we think about that, the financial ways to attract talent that we need right now to fill those open positions, they basically said, if you're a full-time employee, we're going to give you a $400 sign-on bonus after you're here for a certain amount of time. And then if you're a part-time employee, we're going to give you a $200 sign-on bonus. So as you can see, there may be ways, and I'm very hesitant to say, it's always about pay, because I don't think that's the case. And sometimes I think when we look at for some of your industries, you may not be in a position. Some companies are not in a position to pull the pay lever on attracting talent because they're in the middle of either, furloughing and laying people or laying other parts of the organizations off while they're having to up, especially in healthcare and some of the larger companies here in the area. One of them, they had to furlough a lot of their, especially their corporate folks, but they were trying to attract some of the operational positions that they had open. So be interesting to hear your thoughts on pay when we open that up here shortly. The next area, and again, the ones on the screen here right now are kind of the obvious levers to pull in attracting talent. But when we look at benefits, there are some, the normal benefits around the healthcare, PTO, all of those things, which I believe in the third session here in a few weeks, I just encourage you to get on, because Daniel will go into much more detail kind of in the total rewards and the benefits packages that could be considered. But this is a particular lever, of course, as always, to pull in order to attract talent. When we look at marketing efforts and some of the conversation, was talking with Beth in essence, it sounds like a lot of folks are, there is variability, but to generalize, are doing a lot of the marketing efforts that we normally do in order to attract talent and get applicants. A lot, some of that, whether that be on Indeed, on other platforms, to really increase that exposure and hopefully have that response in applications. A few others that we noted in our conversations was around just the job advertising channels, print, radio, TV, billboards. I know at least a few of you, and I'll speak because Lawrence spoke. They have the engine already in place where they're doing that well. And some others that may not be, you may not have that back end already set up to do that. So you have to think about different ways. One thing I want to point out, and I don't know who's doing this, but when we get into marketing efforts, there are ways in which we can target via social media, and it's targeted SEO to your target demographic within a geographic space as well. So if anyone's doing that, please feel free to share, because I know that may be a lever that may be underutilized, because it's a small investment. If you have your target demographic, you're able to do that via Facebook or LinkedIn and some other ways to highlight your opportunities and hopefully help your organization stand out and at least get those applicants' attention. Some of the other around that marketing effort is, one that most companies rely on heavily is that employee referral base, which is still one of the most valuable ways in which we get and attract the talent that we need. Others would be still under that marketing umbrella is the recruiting events, pop-up events, being able to go where the talent is. And this is going to be unique to your respective organization or industry, but there are different ways in how you do that. And I believe, some of you may be doing that. Essence shared a story where, we just said, okay, there's a high likelihood that we have a large potential demographic or pool of candidates that would be at this particular location. Let's meet them where they are. Let's set up, which makes a segue into that fourth area, which is ease of application, ease of screening process. So when we kind of bridge in this particular example that stood out to me, that Essence shared, is that we were bridging that marketing exposure effort along with ease for the applicant. And so they were meeting them where they are. They had everything on site to make it say, ready to work now, hire on the spot. How do we do that and set that up, taking those two things in account? Again, may not be applicable for everyone or for every industry, but it is something to consider. It could be done alone or in partnership with other companies and other organizations to get that, to expand those efforts. Any questions or ideas or thoughts when we talk about what the four on the screen right now are kind of the obvious ones, but I'd love to hear from anyone with something that's worked for you or another idea or lever that you've pulled in regards to one of these buckets here.
We had some great responses in the chat. So if anyone who's spoken up in the chat or typed anything in the chat wants to bring that up vocally, we're open to that.
Please do.
We try to use culture as much as we can internally as far as retaining talent, and kind of treating others the way that we want to be treated. Being a little bit more open and honest, and maybe a little less PC than maybe we should be. But certainly just treating everybody fairly is really kind of the way we try to do that. And just kind of telling people like it is. Sometimes that's not always the case at some places of employment, where there's kind of a backbiting game that can happen at some places. I'm sure we've all experienced that to different degrees throughout our careers, but zero tolerance for drama, that kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. And that kind of gets into the next slide here, in which I'll go ahead and go to that, because what we're talking about is how do you stand apart as an employer, especially if you go back to the data that we have we have 5,000 something job openings and 20,000. Now, all the 27,000 plus probably may not be looking, or they may be in a unique circumstance that may prohibit them from taking a full-time opportunity. But when we look at, to your point, is around how do we tell the story of our culture, of our employer value proposition. I think that is really important. And that can be done through, the marketing efforts and some of the things that we mentioned before. But it is critical to say, what is our strategy for communicating our story and seeing how do we do that, and what are the touch points at which we can do that, and what's important to that potential talent pool, what would be important to them. A couple, and I think in the chat may be referenced here, and we're going to maybe hit on a couple of those, but some maybe out of the box, which I think where we want to go, is really say, how do we think out of the box if this still is an employee-centric market right now in the middle of, a pandemic where the regular rules do not apply. How do we get creative? How do we tell our story? How do we try to provide incentives that take into account the uniqueness of where we are right now? So just a few examples of what some other companies are doing is they're offering memberships. Some of this, may not be going to the gym like we were before, but there are so many different, online memberships for fitness, for mental health, being able to, have that be, again, another incentive for the right population could be beneficial. A few others, that are giving out subscriptions or stipends for subscriptions for Amazon or Netflix because we're home more, or paying for their internet service, different things. Because if we're working from home, again, depending on that particular population you're working with or looking for. A few others is around providing grocery stipends or providing food on site, just little things that would be important and valued by your potential, your population there and your team members or potential team members.
Hey, Christy.
Yes.
So this is Linda from Lee Company. I think we kind of did something outside of the box to that point this year, where most of our talent is frontline, so essential workers happening to be out in the field. And we were able to provide a safety store credit. So a lot of our field workers want those boots that they've got to have, that they're typically paying for out of pocket. But kind of with everything going on with COVID, we felt, let's recognize those that have kept us working and have kept us safe, and have done so by being out in the field and being those essential workers. So we provided a credit to that safety store to cover the cost of their boots.
Oh, that's such a great idea. Some of those things, and that's going to be unique to your particular group or your demographic. And that's again, just, that is an incentive for your existing employees, but how do we share that in our messaging for attracting, talent? That's part of your story. That's part of your narrative that showcases your culture, and also, what are the benefits? What are the things, or how are those rewards? How do they look different in different ways? But that's a really great idea. Thank you for sharing that. There's so many others. I'm trying to monitor the chat too. So FitBits, love that. I mean, we're looking at, that, and there's great benefits to that, right? When we look at, monitoring and helping with healthcare. I had another employee or employer that I worked with that was doing mental health visits, or provided someone on site or virtually, kind of a coach, kind of therapist piece to provide them that opportunity. And so all of those things are helpful. The other, which is on here, which I love, is like that's referenced as Home Depot, is stipends for childcare. Target has also done this for their workers, where they're providing, backup, really affordable backup childcare or elderly care stipends. So all of those things, again, depending on your makeup, the demographics of your workforce, and understanding that, you can adjust your offerings in a way that would hopefully hopefully meet their needs and be attractive to those folks. And that gets us into this flexible schedule piece. You know, as we're talking, to, employers and different companies or just individuals, juggling family demands right now, the virtual school, all of those things. So as an employer, that flex schedule or really figuring out ways to navigate that and to communicate that up front, if that's something you're able to do, would really help alleviate that, because I think that is a big barrier for a lot of talent that is out there. And that gets to the work from home options. Again, maybe not feasible for all employers, but where we can, and again, the critical thing, I'm going to say it over and over again, is how are we highlighting that up front in our marketing efforts or in our social media efforts, because I think that's a big one, which I think we've mentioned here in the chat too. When we look at another area to consider is thinking about the COVID protocols and how we're messaging to that. And we think about what's the barrier for all of those potential candidates. Are some of them worried? Are some of them, fearful from health concerns? And how do we alleviate that up front and really just put their minds at ease? So we're letting them know in our communication plans or in our maybe in our job postings that are online, that we are doing something as an employer. Here are our protocols. There's transparent communications around what those are. And again, I think with that it's not just about sharing that, but I think that also is another way to highlight that the employer or your organization really does care about its people, and it's putting the health and safety of its employees first and foremost. But I think we do have a group of potential candidates, or there's people out there that are really hesitant. And so anything that we can do as an employer on the front end to alleviate that is really important. The next would, and this is again, that story, creating your story, highlighting it in the marketing efforts, in your conversations, in your initial round of interviews, or those on the spot recruiting events, is how are you sharing what the opportunities for growth are? Because if you are hiring for those maybe entry-level workers where really they could stay home and bring in more from unemployment than going to work full-time, how do we create the story and help them see the long-term benefit of joining your organizations? So the ways in which we do that on the front end and are really explicit about that may change their way of looking at that opportunity, or maybe before that they were coming in and just checking a box, but you're able to plant some seeds and help them see the future and why it would be beneficial, and really start to connect them to your culture. And that highlights putting your culture and your brand right out front to differentiate yourself and why it's important to them and why it would be helpful for them. We'll see, keep going here unless somebody feel free. I'm reading the chats as we go here too. We have, perfect. This last chat here, I think, thank you, Essence, is when we think about how do we attract and retain talent, is widen the talent pool. This right here could be a little bit of a both short-term variable and long-term strategy. So we have the partner with school systems, Ingram being able to do that, have basically, we're able to hire 50 junior and seniors to work part-time after school. And they've had great success for that. And we also know what that can do for that long-term strategy around exposure, really helping them see that Ingram, in this case, is an option for them after they graduate. So there are other ways to do that and partner with organizations, partner with school systems, either was for some in the short-term benefit, but really long-term strategy. The next piece here around adjust disqualifiers, I really want to speak to that, because I think this could, when we think about widening our talent pool, we have in the way in which your screening process to check your screening process and say, are we unintentionally basically ruling out potential candidates based on our qualifiers. So a particular example around this could be, felons, convicted felons, or others that have worked their time in this, they're in the system, they're ready to work, they're able to work, but are we being too stringent in a way that disqualifies them, even though that they would be a great addition and very capable of fulfilling those roles? So again, I want to just, if you have ideas or thoughts around that, or if you've done that and looked at how we adjust your qualifiers or disqualifiers, I'd like to hear about that too.
Deanne has also mentioned that she finds that disabled individuals are not being hired at the same rate. So they're kind of being disqualified from the talent pool. If she wants to speak to that, or if you want to expound on that, Christie.
Yeah, that is such a great point. Please speak to that, and more importantly, how you've addressed that, or how are you plan to address that within your own organization. Okay. Well, we'll come back to Diane. Diane, if you are back in or able to hear or jump in, feel free to do so, because I'd love to hear how you're navigating that within your company. Others, if you have any ideas around that disqualifiers or how to broaden that talent pool, please jump in, because I'm sure it'd be beneficial to the others on the call to hear how you're doing that.
Hey, Christie, there's a couple organizations in Nashville. We work with the Men of Valor with rehabilitated prisoners to get them back into the workforce. And so we're working with them. And then also the Hope House out of Nashville as well has men and women that are trying to get back on their feet and get back into the job, market as well. So we're working with them. They just happen to be homeless at the time. So both of them are great organizations and a great talent pool to pull from.
Oh, that's such a great point. And, I'm not really familiar, maybe there's some areas there or some organizations in Rutherford County that could be good partners for that. And, we're looking at that. Project Return in Nashville is a great, another great organization. We also have, the Next Door and a few others that are really looking for, places to work. They'll be really great. They're really great talent pool that I think is untapped. So as an organization, I know we have to have high discernment, and there's liabilities and risk and all of that, but I think there's ways that we can also be good community citizens, community organizations, that there is a benefit around partnering with these nonprofits and other areas that can have dual benefit around attracting talent, getting good talent in, as well as giving back in the community. And it can be some communications around that that would be very helpful in multiple ways. So really, really good example there. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Quick question. This is Dan Wright. When we look at the widening the talent pool, I'd be curious to hear what Lee Company is doing relative to the technical trades. It's very difficult to land that talent right now. And on one hand, it's easy to say we're just going to hire less skill sets, but then you pay for that on the backside. So I'm curious to see how they're addressing that issue at Lee Company.
Great question.
Lawrence, do you want to go for it, or do you want me to take it?
Well, I would say that, we still have the same struggles that everybody else does on finding that skilled talent. So we do focus a lot on marketing what we have as far as our value proposition to passive candidates. We do a lot more digital and social media engagement, but then we really rest heavily on our internal training programs to make sure that if we're going to hire for aptitude, that we go ahead and make sure that we're putting those people through training programs that will turn into those skilled candidates. Obviously, it's not going to pay off within a week or two, but it'll pay dividends down the road. So we've been really, again, just doing what we can to, obviously, we're going after active candidates like everybody else is, but focusing on passive candidates as well, increasing our digital footprint and engaging in our marketing team in doing that.
And about how long are you investing in the training piece before they're participating actively?
And it really depends, because what we'll do is we'll bring them in. Let's just say if it's an HVAC person, we bring them in an entry-level role as a maintenance technician, where they change filters. We stick them with somebody with a little bit more knowledge, and they do they upskill on the job. We also have an apprenticeship program that is designed to turn somebody in from a helper to, a journeyman. But normally after 6 months, somebody is really ready to step into like an entry-level install or entry-level service position straight from a helper or just an unskilled or semi-skilled helper position. But it really varies, and each group is different depending on what they do. Construction does it differently as well. So they have an internal training program where they're switching people between our fabrication facility and then out in the field, trying to get them exposed to more things. So it's really about leveraging our internal resources to do what we can to kind of accelerate that training that they need, because we all need skilled people, and we lose people just like everybody else. So while we concentrate on still finding talent, we really focus on developing the current talent that we have.
I'm curious, Lawrence. You mentioned kind of a short term, and then I see 90 days is kind of a short term, but it sounds like you have kind of a medium range sort of timeline strategy for growing that talent. But what about longer term strategies with regards to reaching out to the community to try to develop that talent pool as a whole for all of the, I mean, not necessarily just for your company, but for the entire area?
And are you meaning that what we're doing as far as developing talent pipelines and things like that?
Yeah, I see Rutherford Chamber just put up in the chat here. RUCO has 4 high schools with skilled trade programs where students earn. Okay, so the high school, I'm thinking more like education engagement and
Okay.
Trade schools and things like that in order to be able to try to grow the talent in maybe a 5, 10, 15-year timeline.
Right. Right now, we really leverage co-ops with our trade schools. That's been a really big bonus for us. There's some military programs that are feeding us people that we don't have to pay for, that they apprentice with us for 6 months and then we hire them. And then right now we're engaging with Rutherford County, Rutherford Works, Rutherford County, and apprenticeship programs. We're trying to figure out how to tie in or create pre-apprentice programs within the high schools that lead directly into apprenticeships at Lee Company. So
apprenticeship programs. Okay. And
yes.
those are paid?
Yes.
Okay.
Great example, Florence. Yeah, I mean, if as we talk about, which I'm going to skip ahead here around benchmarking, I think for all of you on the call is how to make sure we're being proactive in benchmarking and what other organizations are doing within your market and how they're attracting and then retaining and developing their talent. I think Lee Company is a great example of that. So I would encourage you all to kind of take a look at what they're doing, because they have a unique skill set they're trying to build that pipeline for. And I think they're doing a great job of driving that and then driving that engagement as well. I want to just hit on a couple more here, and I'm going to open it back up and put everyone back on and stop screen share. But I think another one is that maybe overlooked a little bit when we're talking about that retain or attracting talent and retaining them. And when I think about retainment on this, is that how do we keep them for that, that get them to that 90-day, 6-month mark? Generally by the time we get them to that point, we're probably going to hang on to them. It's get them get them assimilated really quickly, and to build those connections, build those relational connections quickly. So you think about doing an assessment of what's that employee experience, not just in applying and starting, but what does it look like from day 1 to day 7 to that 30-day, 60-day, 90 mark, and say, what are the expectations of that, being really clear on the front end, and then what is their experience? And so what can we do as an organization to have them connect quickly? Some companies are right out of the gate, which is maybe a little bit more challenging with the COVID situation, but giving them a buddy or a mentor, someone to connect with to help them build relational connection right out of the gate very quickly is very helpful in increasing the likelihood that they'll stay. That clarity of expectation, give it to them, make sure they understand their onboarding process. They understand, what is it going to look like from a training standpoint, make sure they have all the resources and tools that they need, and ultimately set them up to succeed on the front end and make sure it's a really positive experience. And so making sure that those managers or colleagues that they're going to work with, that is that is also something is that we're really promoting the culture and really promoting how do we assimilate new team members. And right now, which for those of you that do have workforces that are hybrid or work from home, that's really critical of how do we keep people connected and aligned and informed. So I put on there that the bottom is around seek feedback early and often. I think this is an opportunity to shore that up, like right out of the gate. There's a few companies here in town that I know they have, either daily or weekly, through social media or technology, just check-ins. Tell me, how would you rate your day? And they call it kind of the listening strategy. So I think, how do we apply that same approach and same strategy with our new hires? And how do we stay close to them and really figuring out a way to do that pulse check and get that feedback so you can pivot and adjust accordingly, and then capture that data from a larger kind of looking at that to adjust strategy where necessary. Really quickly here, I'm gonna kind of go through these. I think we've touched on the next is this leadership escalation is for everyone on the call, and I'm not sure, we're probably different roles, maybe some HR folks. I know from a couple that have spoke thus far, is how are we making sure we're escalating things? How are we making sure we have a strong business case through the benchmarking of what's going on in our market, through the feedback mechanisms and strategies that we have? How are we making the business case in order to then ask, hopefully, we don't have to, but if we have to make the case that we have to give an increase in pay or offerings or these special incentives, how do we make the business case for that, but keeping the leadership aware and, more importantly, a part of the solution early on and as often as possible. So I know that's an ongoing thing for many of you, and there's probably ways in which you're doing that already, but thinking about that in regards to this unique time we're in, if you're having trouble getting the right talent. For some of you that are, larger organizations where maybe your corporate offices are elsewhere, maybe an opportunity is to tap into those resources where they're available. And that could be from a data standpoint, or again, helping you make that business case. The last one here, which we touched on, and it is kind of a thread that we're pulling through all of this, is benchmarking. Again, and this is to reinforce that it's at the micro level, benchmarking what other companies are doing, not necessarily at an industry level, because if someone else in a different geographical area right now, there's just too much fluctuation. So figuring out how do you benchmark, stay in touch with what folks are doing in your area, as well as what's going on with the labor market. So I'm going to, for the last just few minutes that we have, I'm going to stop screen share, and I just want to open it up and hear kind of what's working for you, or what are some challenges or questions you have for your colleagues on this call in regards to attracting talent.
I really like the idea of a pre-apprenticeship program with high schools. Mm-hmm. You can pay them less, right?
Can you pay them less, Beth?
Yes, a pre-apprentice would be a junior or senior in high school who are a part of that career and technical education program. And with all of federally documented apprenticeships, there is a wage progression. So yes, certainly those high school students are going to make less than your 3- and 4-year apprenticeship folks.
Definitely interested in that. You want me to email you, Beth, on that?
Absolutely. Yes. Tennessee actually has a new Department of Labor division for apprenticeship development, and they have folks that can work with you as an employer to help you complete all of the documentation for those federally documented apprenticeship programs at no cost to you. And I will include in our follow-up contact information and a PDF that explains a little bit more about federal apprenticeships.
Great. Great, thank you. And Linda, you referenced the buddy program and just talking about the success around Make It to One program. So I think that tags on to how do we get people connected to our company, to build those relationships, connect to the culture, feel like they're a part of something, and not just coming to show up to execute on what their responsibilities are. I think if you can start to do that, become their friends, actually care, right? I think people need that more now. I know it's crazy. They need it more now than ever, right? And so if we're talking about, you know, the talent that you're looking for, and I know I'm not familiar with some of the, you know, your companies and what's represented here today across the board. You know, I know in talking to Essence and Beth, you know, there's a lot of folks out there that are looking for those mid-level career opportunities. But for some of you, a lot of the job openings are kind of that entry level. So I think we have to have a different strategy for that, and get creative and think out of the box and put ourselves in their shoes, and figure out what are their pain points and what are their challenges. Is it childcare? Is it fear of getting sick with COVID? Is it just, you know, not really worth, you know, giving up the unemployment or taking this risk because it's just, I'm just showing up to work every day, and not really connected to the people or what I'm doing, or I don't see a future there. So I think when we think about employer controlled strategies, I think that's what we want to do, is connect to the minds and hearts of those people and let them know there's opportunity for growth. And it would be a benefit to them to consider working for you or with you. So I know we're about up on time. So I just want to say, you know, thank you for letting me be a part of the conversation. I know there was a lot to cover in a little time, and the challenges you face are big. And these situations and the circumstances we're in right now are just unprecedented. We've saw any word you can fill in the blank that we've said over and over again, and I'm sure we'll continue to say. The volatility is there, but it still comes down to our strategy before, is keep the employee-centric mindset. Keep that mindset, because that's what the data is telling us. And they're, you know, we touched on just a few things. You guys are in it. You guys have more ideas and are doing things that's working or that's not working, that we could all benefit from learning from one another. So just thank you for letting me be a part of the conversation. It's good to see some familiar names and faces. Feel free to connect with me, LinkedIn or anything else. And more importantly, this is just the first of 3. So if you're able to continue, mark your calendar for next week. For those of you, my colleague, Chris, he will dive into some more granular strategies for how to make that applicant process easier and more attractive. And then in the 3rd week, Daniel, that I referenced earlier, will give you some really great ideas and drill down at a granular level around total rewards and what can you look at from a benefit standpoint. And hey, maybe it just reinforces what you're already doing, but maybe through the conversation, you can get some new ideas and know that, hey, we're all in it together. And so hopefully we can help each other out, because the people are out there that want to work. We just got to make sure we're communicating our story appropriately so they want to come work for us. So with that, Beth? Oh, can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Thanks so much, Christy, for joining us. Thanks for everyone who participated today and shared ideas. There's a whole chat box that we're going to capture, and we'll follow up with a copy of the recording if you want to review it or share it with someone else, as well as a couple of the takeaways that I mentioned earlier about apprenticeships. And we'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday at noon.
Great.
Bye,
everyone.
Thank you.